We are very honored to welcome Merrill Markoe, the author and illustrator of We Saw Scenery, the early diaries of Merrill Markoe. He was a head writer for the original David Letterman show and co-creator of Late Night with David Letterman, for which he won 3 Emmys and won a Writers Guild Award for HBO's Not Necessarily the News. She's written for television shows such as Sex and the City, Newhart, and Moonlighting, and written for Rolling Stone, Esquire, and New York Times, and was awarded the Patty Chayefsky Laurel Award for Television Writing Achievement. Tonight, we are very lucky to have Markoe in conversation with Mimi Pond, as we've just learned, the first fellow artist on her virtual book tour. Mimi Pond is an American cartoonist, as well as novelist, TV scripts writer, and comics artist. Gained fame as the author of The Valley Girl's Guide to Life, and is best known as a cartoonist for the autobiographical graphic novels Over Easy and The Customer Is Always Wrong, which I sometimes mutter. I will disappear for a moment. Please give them a big virtual hand. Thank you very much, Merrill Markoe.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, it's great to be here with Merrill, and we were just talking about the difference between talking to a writer and talking to someone else who expresses themselves visually. And is that something you want to say anything about?
Well, you know, I was just talking to you about this a minute ago. When I first met you, I went over to your house and you were working in a cubbyhole, more or less, sort of slightly larger than a post office box. And you were sitting at a computer that had a stack of drawings next to it, a giant tottering stack of drawings. And I went to art school as you did, but I hadn't done any artwork in like 35 years. Really, I'd make people birthday cards, and that was about it. And I just looked at what you were doing, and I thought to myself, I'm such a different person now than I was when I used to paint. I don't nearly have the patience I used to have. Look at the patience she has. She has this massive stack of ever-growing, towering paper beside her. I don't even know where she's getting the patience to do that. And then cut to a couple years later, and I had the stack of drawings next to me, and I still don't know exactly how it happened, except for that somehow writing is a big part of it, certainly. In fact, I'd be interested to hear whether or not because people have asked me this, whether you write the thing first or you're doing it in steps, writing and then drawing. Because I just took a stab. I had no idea really how you do this. I just started doing it.
Yeah, first of all, what was it like for you going back to making visual art after being away from it for so long?
I was kind of amazed that I had been away from it for so long that I had sort of talked myself into thinking that I didn't know how to do it anymore, that maybe I had lost my ability to do it altogether. So when I started drawing and I saw that I could draw again, it was like this, wow, amazing. Not only that, but that also I realized it was a lot like handwriting. Like you can't really get rid of your handwriting, or I can't. I mean, for me to get a new handwriting, I'd have to really give careful thought to the way I was putting down every single letter or every piece of connective tissue or whatever. And that's what I found about drawing is it's in you when you start drawing the way you draw, and you could learn again some other way, but once you got a certain facility for it, it's so much easier to just continue the way you know how to draw, and it's kind of like handwriting.
Well, and also it's like dance, dancers have ballet dancers have to take classes every day. It's all about, muscle memory and repetitive motions and, gestures, because a lot of making, drawings is making marks and making gestures in certain ways that are, they become just a part of you. They're just subconscious expression in a lot of ways. I mean, you want to make a drawing look a certain way, and sometimes it turns out totally different, but it's okay.
But all of your drawings look like Mimi Pond, and it turns out I never would have known what my style was, except that I'd been away from it for so long, and I started to see that it was all coming out a certain way unless I really sat down and went, okay, I want to make this really, um, really representational in a photo realist kind of way. If I went and subdued myself, I could do that. But otherwise, it turns out you just have a style. I mean, I would
Yeah,
recognize your style anywhere. It always looks like you did the drawings, and I didn't think I had that either, but it turned out I do.
everyone does. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, there's Laurie Rosenwald saying hello. Hi, Laurie. Um, yeah. So, I mean, who, what compelled you to think that this should be a graphic novel instead of just a regular memoir?
Well, I never wanted to write a memoir. Of course, I never thought I would do a graphic novel either, but I was reading these, I found these little diaries that I kept when I was in grade school. I don't know about you, but I know you guys save a lot of stuff. I was to your house, and I think I compete with you on every level. I Ever since I worked on the Letterman show a billion years ago, I save everything I think is funny because I'm under the impression that at some point it might trigger something like I
Right.
do a piece of writing from it, or I'm going to use it in something, or I don't know. And it ends up being boxes and boxes and boxes and boxes of stuff that I don't throw away because things that make me laugh are so special to me that I just think, well, if I put it in a file, I'm never going to see it again. Because it'll just be a file with one thing in it. Anyway, I was cleaning stuff out and I was forcing myself to throw a bunch of it away. And at the bottom of one of them, I found these little diaries that I kept when my mother bought me my first diary, which was when I was about 10, 11. And and I thought, okay, this would be funny. I'm going to sit down and I'm going to read these like they're a piece of literature. Knowing that I went on to become a writer, they're the early writings of a writer, and I'll review them and I'll take them seriously. And I started reading them, and I realized that I only remembered about a third of them, which was unusual to me, and then which got me thinking about memory because I was surprised that the stuff I remembered, I really remembered, but most of it I didn't remember, including a day that I had marked as one of the worst days I've ever lived through. I didn't remember at all, but some horrible sandwich. I remember it exactly. So I was just, that got me reading about memory and stuff and why
Uh,
did I save the sandwich and why did I throw away the worst day I ever lived through? And where do those things get stored? And I started realizing all that stuff that I didn't really remember, that I only kind of remembered. I was kind of curious as to what it looked like while it was taking place because I didn't really have a memory for it. Although here's the weird thing about memory. When I was reading the diaries, I realized that I made a memory just reading this stuff. I'd say, I'm sitting in my room and I'm blah, 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 and then I'd make that memory. And then I'd go, okay, was that really a memory or did I just now make that up? So that's why I started doing the drawings. I thought it might be a funny comic strip to have an 11-year-old from another era telling you random stuff because
yeah.
it was really random. It wasn't like there was a story arc. I wasn't being pursued by Nazis or anything, although I was in love briefly with a Nazi.
Yeah. It was not just a Nazi sympathizer.
That which still stuns me. I was thinking about that a half an hour ago.
That was a thing, though. You're a little older than I am, but that was a thing for boys to do in grade school I want to say from the late 50s through the late 60s. Anything Nazi related was sort of perceived by grade school and junior high school age boys as being sort of badass, like the German cross, the Iron Cross was big with surfers and skateboarders, and a swastika was just sort of badass. And you could still walk in my neighborhood up. There was the main street in my neighborhood was lined with all these antique stores, and you could go poke around in these places, and there was Nazi memorabilia for sale, and no one thought anything of it.
Amazing. Well, I'm a little relieved to hear that. I guess I should, for anyone who has no idea what we're talking about, when I was always in love with somebody starting in about fourth grade on, and from fourth grade to sixth grade, I would
pick someone.
Hmm?
Every year I'd pick someone to have a crush on.
No, I always had a crush on somebody, and from fourth grade through sixth grade, I was in love with somebody that was basically, I didn't realize this at the time, but I wrote about it in my diary. When he would see me, he would go, Heil Hitler. And I thought he was flirting with me. I didn't realize he's probably Jew baiting me. And he was probably raised by a family of Nazis, but it never occurred to me. I thought he was just finding a way to be interacting with me. And I laughed
It
about
probably
it.
was it probably was a little bit of that too. And he probably had no idea what he was saying. He was just thinking he was being a smart ass.
Well,
I'm
maybe
sure
his parents taught him to be a Nazi.
maybe.
Because I don't know. It's an amazing thing to me that
This
I
is
couldn't have
Florida.
ever told my
This
parents.
is Florida
I'm
we're
sure my
talking
mother.
about. So,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. This is Florida we're talking about. So you're probably right.
Yeah, I am probably right. I'm sure I didn't tell my parents because my mother wouldn't have thought that was adorable that I was in love with a Nazi. I thought it meant he was paying attention to me, and that was good. So, so that was my Nazi. And then, like you say, all the movies I used to go see were always about how two people hated each other, and then as time went on, love would take its course, and they'd realize they were right for each other.
That was called meeting cute.
Yeah,
And you're
and
right.
all those movies in the '60s were about that people
Yeah.
met at work and just immediately had bad vibes from each other and didn't like each other at all, and then they went on to be in love.
Yeah, there was a movie you went to see as a teenager with your girlfriends and you were making snarky comments all the way through it.
Yeah, it was yeah, what was that again? I forget what it was. It starred I think somebody like Brenda Lee or somebody. It was just some teenage movie. I went to teenage movies. I was a little younger than teenage, but
Actually, I went with my best friend from high school to see Love Story just so that we could sit there and fake cry all the way through it. So I relate.
that's pretty funny.
The usher came and told us to shut up.
That's pretty funny. Yeah, I was amazed at how much I was steeped in two things, boys and pop culture. I wrote about a ton of pop culture, and I always wondered how it is I wound up writing for TV, and it ended up that I was totally primed for it. I was completely obsessed with TV. When I got to high school and college, I stopped altogether. I didn't watch TV at all. It was considered too plastic. But when I was a kid, I was watching so
Yeah.
much of it that I was
Oh,
writing
yeah.
about it in my diary.
So how old were you when you realized there was power in being able to make people laugh?
I don't think I really realized it. I just always did it. I always did it because it didn't seem like an occupation or anything that was a power until I was. In fact, when I finally moved to LA and tried to get work writing television and got work really quickly, which was astonishing. That was the first time that I ever realized that I had any power. I It didn't occur to me before that. I mean, I always knew that I was making jokes all the time behind people's backs and well, you know what he's doing. But I was never the class clown where it was look at me, look at me. I was the person who whispered in back of the class clown and maybe even made fun of the class clown, but quietly somewhere else in the room. I don't think it really was. My parents didn't value humor particularly much. I hear a lot of people say, my family was really funny. In fact, my brother is the funny one, but I don't. That was not my family. Was that your family?
They liked humor. I mean, my dad introduced me to Mad Magazine, which we both, know is like the Bible.
It was for me too. It
Yeah,
was.
yeah.
I mean, I would say Mad Mag. It never occurred to me that I could actually write for Mad Magazine. I just knew that I couldn't wait to see more of it. That was, I
Yeah.
think, the thing that raised me basically was Mad Magazine.
I mean, it also sounds like your story is kind of similar to mine, where like you're going along just trying to be, a nice, polite, quiet girl who does, all the right things and follows all the rules. And then one day you wake up and you're like, what is this crap? And you start talking back. And I think this happened to me in like sixth grade, and my mother was astonished, like, well, who's this girl? And I'm like, what do my mother already was like Maud. She was like the Gentile Maud, and she was like really outspoken and loud and in charge. And everywhere she went, people thought she worked in the store because she had this air of authority about her. And she was
That
shocked
does
when
sound
I,
like my mother.
yeah, although your mother sounds a lot, boy, what a piece of work.
Yeah. Did you get along with your mother?
Yeah, no, I got along with my mother, and she was great. She was very supportive, and was thrilled by everything I did. So, um, your mother sounds like, I mean, she was, so many women of her generation were so, there was so much anger right under the surface all the time because of who they were expected to be, that it's kind of
Yeah.
like, it's amazing that no one's hasn't written more about how there's, these intelligent beings who are, just like resigned to being housewives, and no one wants to know anything about them or their inner lives or their interests or anything. It would drive you insane.
Yeah, well, my mother was scoring pretty heavily during World War II when all the guys were gone. She was one of these people who got out of high school by 15, and when during World War II, she had a job doing copywriting at Time Magazine briefly.
Wow.
She was working on a softcore porn magazine for a while. She was
Wow.
kind of a weird adventurer, and
Yeah.
then she in her mind, in fact, she got part of a graduate degree in Mandarin Chinese. In her mind, she was
Wow.
like a foreign correspondent or something. And
No
then
wonder she was so mad.
she was really mad, and she would tell you that she sort of taught me to write. I mean, she did in fact teach me to write, but I don't think she wanted me to actually succeed where she hadn't really pushed her way in.
Yeah.
That I think pissed her off.
My mother had a odd story like that too, where she went to Little Rock Central High School. She graduated like in 51, and I think the integration was in 55 or 56. And her journalism teacher was later was portrayed by Joanne Woodward in a TV movie about the integration struggle at Little Rock Central High School, as like sort of like a civil rights heroine, as the journalism teacher. And my mother was the editor of the newspaper and of the yearbook, and was being sort of was this teacher's pet, and was being primed. And she had a scholarship to go to Smith or Vassar, I forget which. And then at the last minute, before she graduated, this journalism teacher went and totally undermined all her confidence and told her she would never make it. My mother wanted to go to New York and become a book editor, and she had this dream. She was going to go there. It was going to be great. And then suddenly this woman tells her, I don't think you've got it. And it turned out that this woman was doing this every single year to someone. It was this weird, weird thing. And so my mother, it's like, suddenly turned to her family and said, I'm not leaving. I'm not going to go. And no one in her family in Arkansas said, well, of course you're going, young lady. You're going to go and become a star. They're like, okay. And that was her. Then it was like she went to work at the phone company and then moved to San Diego and met my father, who was in the Navy.
There's always somebody nearby who's going to tell you that odds are that you can't do what you want. I mean, there's
Yeah,
always somebody in the waiting in the wings to tell you that.
yeah, and there was no one to tell her, don't listen to that. That's the sad reality of our mothers' lives.
But weirdly enough, there was no one to tell me that either. But I got in a car and went to LA by myself, and I'm still like stunned that I did. I mean, I wasn't really that big of an adventurer, but I got in a car and I drove to LA, and I checked into a hotel where people brought hookers, and I
But
didn't know.
you'd
I
already
didn't
lived
know what
through
hookers were really.
you'd already lived through an adolescence where your parents let you get on a bus and go to San Francisco to see the Beatles when you were like, what, 15?
Yeah.
Boy,
I'd be 14 for the Beatles, but they let me go. I think I maybe didn't tell them where I was going when I was going to the Ken Kesey acid test and all of that stuff. I mean, I couldn't have told them because I can't believe they let me go to that stuff.
well, but you were already taking the initiative. So, you were on your way, I think.
Yeah, it's but still the fact that I went by myself to LA and checked into a scary motel by myself and just knocked on doors and got a job still is an amazement to me. I mean, it was really
Well,
unusual.
there's a lot to be said about being young and dumb. You know?
Yeah, yeah, young and dumb.
But
Another,
also, I think that what's interesting in your book is you cover both the Beatles concert and the Ken Kesey acid test, and it's those things that later become historic, and like, and I was in New York in the 80s, as were you, of course, and now kids are like, oh, New York in the 80s, man, did you really go to Danceteria? And it's like, it's just like the Beatles or the Ken Kesey acid test. You want to say, also I know people that went to Woodstock who I remember in the 70s told me, oh yeah, man, I was there, it was awesome. They're like 3 or 4 years older than me. And I'm like, oh man, I missed that. And like now they come back and say, it was horrible. It was actually horrible. It was miserable. It was raining the whole time. I was cold. I was hungry.
well, that was the thing that was amusing to me about my Beatle review. I wrote terrible reviews of the Beatles because the Beatles were obviously my favorite band when I was 14.
Of course.
But you couldn't hear anything at those concerts.
Yeah, it sounds
I
like
was right in the front because everybody rushed the stage. So I was standing on the seats, the front row seats, and I was a couple of yards from the Beatles and couldn't hear anything, which was infuriating to me. I mean, it's still infuriating to me that I went all the way there. Of course, tickets were only $6, but at the time it was like $6.
I know.
Ah, $6.
I know they played the Starlight Bowl in San Diego, but I think I was only like 8, so no way was I going to get to go.
Anyway, that it's amazing to me that that I went to pretty much every single thing that was going on in the 60s in San Francisco, and I left them all early. That was my signature.
See, I'm right there with you.
They always smelled of patchouli, which I never really liked
The
patchouli.
worst. It's the worst.
And the Ken Kesey acid tests were so much smoke that I remember you couldn't close your eyes even for a minute because the burning was so intense.
Oh. I like the line that you had about the sanest option was to become a smartass, which are words to live by.
Yeah, no, it was the sanest option.
Wonderful writing in this book.
I don't know that I even was doing it on purpose, but I mean, it really made sense to me not to play along at some point. I played along as hard as I could for a pretty long time.
These end papers are stellar. I belong to a Facebook group called We Love End Papers. I think I'm
I did that in the 8th grade.
Yeah, that's
a real drawing, and it looks exactly like her. I mean, the thing that's cool about
I could see her in my mind.
Well, she smelled really bad. That was the thing that was most
the picture that was shaving her legs in class.
Well, it was Florida. I felt terrible that we were moving from Florida, but now I look back and they saved my life by moving me to California. I mean, I'd be a Floridian, and that not the best option.
No. Also, brothers are the worst. Can we agree? Although I don't know how your brother went from being a complete monster to being this erudite academic.
Yeah, no, I don't know how he did it there. I was gone for a bunch of years and I came back and he had turned very genteel. I guess he was, that's the beauty of the frontal lobe, I think. Is, you don't get a frontal lobe until you're 28, 27.
I know. And that's, I never kept a diary because I had 2 brothers and I knew if they found my diary, I would be tortured and teased mercilessly. And so all that went unrecorded.
Well, it is very cool to have them. It's a very cool thing. I have them all the way up through to last week. It's kind of amazing. I am proud of that. But anyway, that was why I decided to start drawing them. And I also decided when I did this book that I was only going to put this stuff in the book based on what I had written. I wasn't going to use just general memories. So it's not a memoir so much as it's a legitimate interpretation of what I wrote when I was 11.
Yeah.
and with overview, because I felt like at some point as I was doing these, it started out they were only, I was just interpreting what was on the page, and then I realized that it was so random I needed to unite them somehow, and it took me a couple years to figure out how to, it's a weird thing, you have to figure out what the story arc is of your life to make a
Right.
book out of it. You
And then
I
you
mean,
have to
I'm sure
figure
you
out
had to
what,
do that with the waitressing stuff too.
yeah, yeah, and then you have to figure out what it all looks like. I mean, with my
That's kind of fun.
yeah, I mean, with Over Easy and Customer, it was like the world was already in my mind, having lived through it. I knew exactly what it looked like. But now I'm working on this book about the Mitford sisters, where it's just I mean, every page is different, and I've been using Pinterest as a tremendous source of inspiration for all kinds of images. And you talk about saving things. If you really want to cut down on storage, you could scan a bunch of stuff and put it up on Pinterest for yourself, or just put it in a file on your computer to save as
That's
images.
probably what I would do. Mimi and I were talking about this before, but Mimi does physical paintings that are 8 by 10, and I was doing that when I started, but I learned how to do digital stuff. And once I was introduced to the undo button, I never went back. It was the greatest. They should get a Nobel Prize for the person
They,
who
they
came up with
should.
the undo button. That you don't have to like figure out. You just go back to the spot, that one spot where you screw up, and it's
Although,
gone,
although
and never to be seen again.
there's a lot to be said about making mistakes on purpose, or mistakes, making the mistakes work for you too.
Huh.
There's a page here where you were friends with another girl, and you went, you're the Gilmer Club,
Oh yeah.
and you spied on people, and this is before the brilliant book Harriet the Spy, which is
I never read that.
oh, it's so good. It's a children's book, but it's about an 11-year-old girl who likes to go and spy on people and then write in her diary about them. You should. It still holds
That sounds
up.
great.
It's a great book, and it inspired a lot of girls. And the Louise Fitzhugh who wrote it was a really miserable, unhappy lesbian. I think there's a biography coming out about her soon. And she did the drawings too, and the drawings are wonderful. And the little girl looks like a little Junior Dyke. I mean, she's not effeminate. She's not pretty. She's just a person. She's just a small person. And it was the first time I'd ever seen a girl portrayed like that in a children's book, where she's just wearing jeans and sneakers and a hoodie shirt, and she had binoculars, and she would go spy on people and make notes about them. And that's what this page reminded me of, where you went and spied on people at the beach and stuff, and which also reminds me of one of my very favorite movies, which is The World of Henry Orient.
Oh, that was a good movie.
Oh, so great. It's about two teenage girls who on the loose in New York City, who spy on a concert pianist. One of the girls is a classical pianist prodigy, and she's obsessed with this classical pianist whose name is Henry Orient, and he's played by Peter Sellers, and he's an aging roue, having an affair with a married woman played by Paula Prentice, and they meet in Central Park, and these two girls go and spy on him, and it gets.
And I was when I saw that movie, I was mostly taken by her coat. I went and got a coat like that. She was wearing a big sort of fur.
The fur coat. Her mother, yeah, and her mother's played by who's the oh darn it, it's
well, if I were at my own computer, I'd Google it for you, but I don't. I'm at
Angela Lansbury playing a really nasty, wicked mother, and it gets really nasty.
Well, part of what Mimi was talking about is in my book. I mentioned, I of course really remembered I was in a club called the Gilmer Club for for 2 years with a girl named Jill, the latter part of the name being being me. But what was interesting to me when I was reading the diaries, I remembered being in the Gilmer Club, but I didn't know what we did. I remembered laughing. I remember walking around the block one time, and I couldn't remember what else. And it was funny that I recorded what we did at every meeting. Like, for instance, one meeting was we ended after just a few minutes because there were too many flies. I thought that was really funny. It's the examples of I didn't really know what you were supposed to write in a diary, so I was just writing down everything, and
But I mean,
it's very different than what you do when you're an adult and you start whining to yourself, or you start using a diary as a release, or as a support system, or as a creative outlet. It was just me trying to respect the diary by giving it what it wanted, and I didn't know what it wanted from me, so I was just writing down everything every day.
well, I think what it got was like young you as an observer. You're obviously noticing everything early on.
And then there was a period of time too where I started thinking I was writing for somebody, which was interesting to me. I was talking to you. I had no idea who I was meant, but I was recording the news in the most the least informed possible way. I would have, one or two sentences about something I thought was important, sort of sandwiched into the middle of what I did for homework
Right, like
in
Cuban
order to
Missile
give it some
Crisis.
import. So it's just sort of a funny portrait of a kid, is what it is.
Yeah, but also you were like you were obviously discerning from an early age. Where you talked about the sixth grade party that had inedible hot dogs,
Yeah.
horrible ambience, everything subpar.
Yeah, I was trained to be judgmental.
I mean, there's just really weird stuff too. Like you got I mean, you called in radio shows and everything. I remember one whole summer, like breaking my neck trying to answer the phone because I just knew it was going to be the radio station calling my house randomly, and I kept answering the phone. I listen to Double Cash KGB.
Well, the one I thought was funny that I completely forgot entirely is I was apparently calling this radio station and yelling "bone jammer," which meant nothing to me. I didn't know that there could be any like secondary implications of the words "bone jammer." I just was, I was just an annoying 11-year-old calling up a radio station, and I hear them on the radio sometimes now when I listen to talk radio. I hear an 11 or 12-year-old calling in, and I just think, there she is. This year's 12-year-old.
But like getting to ride with the host of the Empty Graves, the host of the Dungeon Show.
Oh, that was big. That was big. My parents knew somebody who had owned a shopping center, and so I got to ride with the monster host from a TV show
That's
to the
pretty
shopping center. And I just remember making annoying interview questions for him, like, "Aren't you embarrassed wearing that?" Like I thought this was making me interesting. Like, I was humiliating him. It was making me a person of some
it was
gravitas.
a discerning and sophisticated viewpoint for a kid your age.
Yeah, yeah.
Instead of just
Not
like, wow, it's the gravedigger.
not just leveling him within an inch of his life and making him humiliated.
Okay, we have to talk about horses because the whole girls and horses thing. I think it's all about control. Like girls have no control at all. They're not taught they have any control over anything, and they get on this 2,000-pound animal and they can control it. It's exciting.
And also it's about just animals. I mean, I was always an animal lover.
Yeah.
It's the combination. It's an animal that you can communicate with on some level, and and then you get, like, when you're galloping or whatever, you are the horse, kind of.
Yeah.
For me,
Yeah,
it was
that's true.
sort of uniting and becoming the horse, sort of, and in a way it was, and so it was so romantic and glamorous and fabulous. Did you ride when you were?
My parents, probably like yours, were figured out early on that the whole horseback riding thing was just a slippery slope to a bottomless money pit, because that's what owning a horse is. And they didn't encourage it, but I had a best friend whose mother had ridden as a child and would drive us, the like half an hour to the stables. And I had to use like my Christmas money to pay for the lessons. So I really enjoyed it while I could. And then in 7th grade, Lisa Williams became best friends with someone else, and it was all over. But
I still don't forgive her for that.
no, I did enjoy it. But National
That's probably
Velvet,
the best part of my childhood, really. When I
yeah.
think back on what I wouldn't mind doing again, I would pretty much let most of it go, but I wouldn't mind having the horses stuff come back.
But National Velvet was a really important movie too, because it was one of the few movies for like The World of Henry Orient that showed it was centered around a girl.
It's true, isn't it?
And the other thing that's important about it is that the mother in National Velvet had been had swum the English Channel and had been an athlete in her youth, and encouraged her daughter to pursue her dream of being a jockey, and told her to go for it. And
I never really remember that part. I just
never see those kind of scenes in movies from that period. The only other one I can think of is A Tree Grows in Brooklyn, which reduces me to sobs every time I see it, because at the end the father has the charming but drunken Irish father has died looking for work in the snow, and the mother is pregnant and it goes into labor, and tells her daughter that and she's in the throes of labor, and she's telling her she's sorry she couldn't be there more for her, but she was just so overwhelmed by being a mother and having all these children, and she thought she was a wonderful writer. I mean, I'm just like, I tear up thinking about it. You didn't see those kind of movies then.
right. Well, until recently there really wasn't any attempt to actually put females in anything.
No,
I mean,
no.
as recently as 2003 or 2002, I pitched a show at, I think it was ABC, where they told me we already have a female-driven show this season.
Oh yeah.
Period.
And
And
I got. Oh, you probably got told like I did, like, oh, we already have a woman on staff.
yeah. Well, actually, when I started, they used to sometimes hire 2 women. It was the quota system, but one woman looked so obvious that they sometimes would have a second one to kind of masquerade it. But my very first job that I ever got in TV, I submitted some work, and then at the job interview, the producer started yelling to the head writer, "Come in here and take a look at Merrill Markoe," because they thought I was a guy. They'd already hired their 2 women.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
that I was a guy, and so then they had 3 women, which was amazing, and soon to be rolled backwards, because
Of
that's the
course.
thing about feminism. They roll it forwards and then they roll it backwards.
Roll it back, yeah. And then the whole, body shaming thing.
Oh,
That
well,
was
yeah.
always,
Well, that's just a lifelong pursuit for women, isn't it?
yeah, I
It's
think
it's
so.
it's
Although I
part
was
of the
fortunate.
body.
Yeah, no, I was fortunate enough to have evaded a lot of that stuff because I just like to eat too much, and I was fortunate just to have a metabolism that was fine until I had children, and then it was all
Really,
over.
that's how you became such a good cook. As you were just able to eat anything? Because starting at about 7, I went on a diet.
Wow, yeah. I mean, and it was one of those. There's another movie that's great. Um, shit. It's the name of a dance. Shag the movie. Did you ever see that? It was done in the 90s, and
Not the shags. It's not
no. There's a dance from the early 60s called the Shag. So it's about these teenage girls who are about to graduate from high school, and they live somewhere in South Carolina, and they are able to talk their parents into letting them go by themselves on a weekend trip to Myrtle Beach, where one of their family has a beach house. And it's just a fantastic movie, all about girls and women. And one of the girls one of them is Phoebe Cates, and her mother, hands her a can of Metrical, as they're driving away in the convertible, and she throws it out the window.
Wow, you didn't need to do that with me. When I was in college, I used to eat Metrical cookies, but they said you could have 9 a day, 3 for each meal. And I didn't trust that because they were cookies. So I ate half of that.
Boy, well, I mean, there's the only actual photo of you as a teenager in here that I could find was the one where you were on the front page of the paper with your father protesting.
Yeah,
Like,
no, I didn't put any photos of that. I just had
Sunday dresses, few beards.
well,
But
that
you look like
that
a
was
wraith
amazing to
in
me,
that.
actually, that happened. That was an early civil rights. That was well, it was an early one. It was the big civil rights movement. And my father and I went to a rally and got our picture on the front page of the Palo Alto Times.
You're kind of like a zealot. You're everywhere. You're at
I was
civil rights.
everywhere. I was selling, but I didn't leave that early because I was with my dad. But I was terrified when I realized I made the front page of the Palo Alto Times because I thought it was a really bad picture, and I was terrified that guys in my new school would see it and think I was disgusting because not because I was at a civil rights rally. I was proud of that. It was just because I had a bad picture on it.
My parents took us to peace marches too. That was cool. I was like 12 and already like saying, look at all those cute hippie guys.
Yeah, the cute hippie guys.
This brings me to another thing is like you figured out early on, as I did at about 13, that it was going to be years before you were going to find a boyfriend of any intelligence. You're going to have to be at least 18 in order to actually date anyone with any intelligence, because anyone who would be interested in an intelligent teenage girl who was older was probably a creep.
I don't remember that. I was willing to go meet some creeps. I don't think I had any standards at all. You know,
Well,
I was
I,
judging people by hair length pretty much at that point.
yeah, no, I mean, I don't get me wrong. I had more than my share of weirdos and creeps, but I knew it was going to be a really long time before I met anyone who was like truly worthy. But in the meantime, yeah, I was going to mess around a lot.
How long have you guys been married now?
Oh, let's see. 32 years.
Amazing. That's amazing.
Yeah. And then I guess together 36.
And
So
he's the best version of a weirdo and a creep.
yeah, well, like you said, the hippocampus doesn't really fully form until you're 28. And that's when I decided it was time to get serious. And that's when I met Wayne. It was like,
Really?
they
In
like
what
the,
age?
that the brain was finally fully formed enough to stop dating horrible men, which of course we all did.
That's impressive. And I didn't mean to call him a weirdo and a creep. I was kidding.
I know.
He's completely impressive.
I also love this picture of your brother torturing you because I so deeply relate to it.
Yeah, my brother turned out to be an archaeologist. My brother's gone now, but he was the leading authority on the Phoenicians. And I say the Phoenicians and not the Phoenicians because he said the Phoenicians.
Oh, it's
I'm
Phoenician.
guessing he knew. So,
So was he a clinical Phoenician?
he was a PhD. He was Dr. Markoe.
Wow.
Went from a complete brat to a guy with a PhD in archaeology.
And your grandmother seems to be fascinating.
My grandmother spoke only. Well, that was I read a lot of. I guess one of the things I thought was an interesting reason to write this thing is I was reading my own anguish. I was always really in anguish over not having a boyfriend and in anguish over this and anguish over that. And I was thinking, well, it's really common to be a girl in anguish when you're that age, and maybe that would be comforting to other girls in anguish who would see that I apparently got through that and went on to at least write this book. If you don't know anything else about me, I at least wrote this book. So apparently you can get through, this boyfriend crap and the weird parent stuff. You can sort of ride it through and come out with a sense of yourself. That I guess that was partly what I wanted to do with this book. I mean, the women in my family were very weird. My mother was repressed and angry, and my two grandmothers are a complete mystery to me still. They both were immigrants who came from families that of 13 kids, and neither of them ever talked about their families. I know almost nothing about them, and they both spoke in cliches. They both the one that you just showed the picture of used to just say to me, Merrill, people need people, it's a song. And that would she said stuff like that to me, and I go,
Live.
I would have, I now I still wonder how she got through with 13 brothers and sisters, but I have no information, and now she's
Wow, that's a shame.
Well, that was the women in my family. So I was like a Martian. I was bothering to try to follow a particular bend of all my own making was just irritating and seemed very unwise to my family, I think.
Boy, it's just amazing. I love where you said I was getting all my romantic advice from Mad Magazine.
That's was not a lie either.
I know, I know. This was the first, but not the last time I would learn sarcasm was not a good tool for seduction.
Yeah,
that was a hard lesson for me too.
I thought, if you were attracted to a guy and you go up and you say something really snarky and insult him, he goes, "Hey."
Well,
so I of course don't have a copy of my book here, so I can't go right here, buy my book. But I hope my friends all seem to like it, so I hope.
Here it is. With
And
all my
I should explain the title. The title is "We Saw Scenery" because I mentioned that a number of times in my diary. It's how I described things that weren't me. It was like me and my family and the boy I'm in love with, and then scenery was sort of the least descriptive possible way to describe anything, and that's how I saw it. The world was scenery.
Well, do you think we are ready to start taking questions yet, or should we blather on some more?
You definitely have, we have a question here from Nina, who asked how long the process took from when you realized you were going to do it until completion.
For me, it took about 2.5 years or 3 years because I had to figure out what the book was. And then, after I got a lot of the drawings done, and I was just doing drawings of this diary, then I realized friends of mine were telling me, well, that's a book. You should make this into a book. And then I couldn't figure out what the book was because imagine, if you will, you have to figure out what the story arc is of your life. And I realized there wasn't a story really. It was the kid who wrote those diaries was just writing random stuff. And then we did this test, and then we did this, and then I did that. And I thought, well, this is so random. I can't make anything out of it. So I started looking into memory. What do you remember? What do you forget? And then I started looking into how the adult version of me sees what the kid was doing. I especially started doing that when I fell in love with a Nazi and I wanted to draw myself into the frame and just go, what's wrong with you? And, once I started putting all those other pieces together, then I actually put the drawings down for a while and just worked with the text because I realized if I couldn't get the book part pulled together, then just the drawings were going to be random. I think Mimi works a whole other way, don't you?
It depends. I mean, it's a process. Like you said, you have to figure out what is the story here. And with my books Over Easy and Customers Always Wrong, it was like I was keeping notes, making notes for years and years and years, but I didn't know who the center of the story was and what it all really meant. And then without giving anything away, there was one day where I was just, it was just like a lightning bolt hit me. And I was like, of course that's it. It makes total sense. And I was able to go on from there.
So you have a really good narrative in those books. And I was really admiring them when I was trying to figure out
thanks.
I didn't have a narrative for a while and I had to really put everything down and just work on the narrative for a while because it was important to me that the words worked as well as the drawings. Once I realized I could do the drawings, it was a layered process that was confusing until it wasn't, but it took me
Yeah.
about 3 years, I'd say, 2.5, 3 years. How long did Over Easy take?
Oh, you don't want to know.
I do
I mean,
actually.
I was raising children too, so that
So
was
you
like
started it back then?
I started I started writing. I wrote it initially as a conventional piece of fiction because it's fictionalized, and that's another thing is with memory is now I have to really be careful to remind myself that there's parts of it that are fiction that I'm sometimes I think I actually experienced. But I started like actually writing it in earnest when my daughter was about 4 or 5, 4, yeah, and then off and on and off and on. So
So that
from
was
about,
a long time. That was
from
15
like
years.
no, that was like that was well, that would have been like 2001 or so. But then like just slowly and dribs and drabs over the year. And then I finished it as a piece of fiction and my agent couldn't sell it. And I was like in tears and I finally had to break down and admit to myself that it wanted to be a graphic novel. I'm like, it seemed like so much work. I thought no one could possibly do that much drawing. And then it turned out I could. And it was like, I had to say to myself, you like to draw. So, I mean,
But
but
it is an impossible amount of drawing. It does seem like that until you realize you like it, and that
yeah,
you sort of at some point look forward to waking up in the morning and
right.
continuing it. It's
Yeah.
it is fun. Drawing is more fun than writing. There's no question about it. For me,
Yeah.
anyway, it's that
No, it
left
is.
brain,
It
right
is.
brain.
The writing is more painful, and there's a lot of times where you spend a lot of time turning yourself inside out, torturing yourself with the writing until it becomes obvious what you have to do, and then you realize there's pictures start popping up in your mind, and you go, oh, of course.
Well,
When you can see it, it's so much easier when you can actually see it in your mind.
well, for me, the thing that I realized I loved about drawing is that it's got that right brain autopilot aspect to it. Like I can never go on autopilot when I write. I'm always present all the time.
Yeah.
I'm just hovering nearby, going, ah, oh, well, just fretting and working and picking words and stuff. I can't really listen to music when I write. I can't really talk to other people when I
No,
write. I
no.
can't drink. I can't do anything. But drawing, once you get going, it's like driving. You look up and it's 8 hours later.
Yeah, yeah,
It's an amazing other kind of meditation, really. They
yeah.
put writing on the wrong side of the brain. Music and art are right side and writing is left side. They screwed with writers that way. It isn't fair, really. But
It's not.
I was happy to have drawing back. I mean,
Yeah.
it's hard to give it up.
Yeah, it looks like someone else is asking, uh, since this book was based on your childhood diary, do you think you'll write any more books to continue the story?
Um, I guess that depends on how well it sells. I mean, I would be entertained by doing it, but if it really gets down to some point to commerce. I mean,
I,
it was fun to do it. Now that I look back on it, it was a fun endeavor.
Actually, I think it would be a good idea for you to do a graphic novel about your days in New York because everyone wants me to do the book after the customer's always wrong about what happened when I moved to New York. And my response has been like, I was happy. I met the love of my life. I got to have a career. I was miserable as a waitress and having unhappy love affairs and trying to fight my way out of this place so that I could go do what I wanted to do. And once I got out, like there's, what's the conflict there?
Well, weirdly, you were saying that thing about people asking you in the 80s in New York, did you go to, what was it called?
Danceteria.
Danceteria. We used to I was working on the Letterman show and we used to get invitations to all that stuff. We didn't go to one thing. We got there in the morning and we left late at night and we were in 30 Rock day and night. I didn't go to a single one of those clubs.
Well, I know, but like for
I
just
went
all
to
the,
everything in the
all the
60s. I went to nothing in the 80s.
well, all the backstage stuff though at the show would be fascinating. And by the way, you
No
didn't.
backstage stuff for me. There was backstage stuff for other people. For me, it was in my office.
Oh,
Like I had so much work to do that I could never leave my office.
by the
So
way, you didn't miss anything.
it didn't look to me like I'm missing much. I figured it couldn't be any more interesting than Ken Kesey's acid test. It looked less interesting to me, actually.
And then someone said, Nina asked, I know how hard the process is and how much work. Have you both felt catharsis during or after doing graphic memoir?
I'm I don't know about if I ever feel catharsis, but I was really happy to reincorporate drawing into my life again after giving it up for 40 years. I realized that I had worked really hard at various points in my life to learn to draw, and then I had just given it up completely. And it was nice to have it back. It's a nice, soothing, additional thing to know how to do. Writing is never soothing for me.
Well, they're really
I'm trying to
fun.
write something right now, and I've spent 3 days not starting it. Just start watching pieces of something on HBO and looking to see what else is on Twitter. I don't do that when I'm drawing. I just start to draw.
Yeah,
Writing is really hard.
yeah, writing is hard. Someone wants to know why did you move from Florida to California?
My dad was a building developer. He had a little construction company, and I guess he moved to the San Francisco Bay Area. I think that there was land that he wanted to develop. In fact, I'm sure that's what it was. And I don't know. I guess he got. I'm not sure why he. I'm grateful that he did, because I feel like it turned me into a way more interesting person than I was headed for when I was living in Florida. But that was it was my dad's economics that moved us. I did not want any part of the move. It made me miserable. So I was in a sorority where I still wonder what that sorority was. I was in some kind of sorority in 8th grade, and it seems to me the point of the club was to get into the club. And after that,
It seemed like the point was for the president of the club to tell everyone else they sucked.
There was one point where the one meeting was about somebody had like an aunt who was a model, and she came and walked around, just looked around the room and went, too fat, too thin, too fat, too thin, too thin, too fat. She let us know, all of us, what our physical deficits were. So it's good to get a hold of that. And you had to work to get into that club too, to find out that stuff.
It's just incredible. What's amazing to me is, and this is, I can't believe it. It sort of recently I had this thought about how women are, it's just like baked in from the time you're very young that your whole purpose is to make yourself look as attractive as possible for a man. Like that's really all you should be thinking about all the time.
Yeah. Or for the other girls, so you can get into their sorority.
But mostly the end game was you wanted to make yourself
get a boyfriend. Yeah,
yeah.
I was in misery over that. I was writing so many entries in that diary where I'm a reject. Nobody loves me. Nobody, I just read the stuff and thought, I guess girls are doing that now too. And it's just, what an awful, awful.
It is awful.
Thing.
Yeah.
And so I was actually thinking if in fact I put that stuff in this book and girls saw that, they'd go, well, this has been going on a long time. I guess she got through it. I guess I'll get through it. And you do.
Who's the singer, the very young singer who's, God, that sounds so old now. Who's that girl?
Taylor Swift?
Who?
Taylor Swift?
No. Younger. Her hair is like half neon green and half
Billie
yellow.
Eilish?
Yes. Yeah. I admire the fact that she is sort of like completely camouflaged her body, and like she's sort of completely rejected all those ideas about female beauty and you have to make yourself attractive. I'm like, yay!
She sort of did, but she's looking pretty cute.
Yeah, well, Hollywood will
You
eat
got
her
if you
up and spit her out, and then she'll have to figure it out all over again. So we have that to look forward to.
we do.
Let's see. Do we have any other questions? Someone says, Linda Berry says when she gets stuck with writing, she writes with a paintbrush.
Yeah, I took a workshop with Linda Berry, who I couldn't admire more. I just
Yeah, she's
adore
great.
the work of Linda Berry. And I think Linda Berry is telling you how Linda Berry works, but boy, I couldn't write with a paintbrush. I mean, I can, in fact, write with a paintbrush, but I don't know why I would want to write with a paintbrush. I mean,
Well,
I
no,
understand people have their own
yeah.
ways of working through things. She likes to keep your hand in motion too, and I didn't really feel that was needed for me.
Well, here's what it is for me: is if I write it on a computer or typewriter, computer, with comics, everything, the text is too much. And actually, one of my great mentors is the cartoonist Sherry Flanagan, who was the cartoon editor at the National Lampoon, which is where I got my first big break. And she told me to like cut down the writing part. The word balloons could only be so much because no one wants to read that much hand lettering, except maybe if it's Linda Berry's. That seems to be the only rule, the only exception. But so I stopped writing comics on a computer. I mean, because I'll write out. I don't know about you. I kind of write it out like a script, what everyone's saying, because I can kind of see what's in my head. This character's talking to that character, and this is what the scene looks like, and then I go and draw it. But if I just force myself to handwrite it on a piece of paper, I can just keep stripping it down to the basic elements that it needs to be, because the emphasis should be the balance of the writing and the drawing, because you don't want like a huge block of text and a little tiny drawing. You want it to be the story to be told visually, and that's one of the most important things about making comics, I think, is making it visual. I think one of the greatest tools for cartoonists to learn about visual storytelling is movies. No one really talks about that, but movies are full of visual storytelling and all kinds of.
Well, they're very much like that.
Yeah.
Graphic novels are like a weird long way around movie.
Yeah,
They're a lot more work than a movie.
Some of the worst graphic novels I've seen just look like crappy storyboards.
Yeah, there's that too.
Yeah, there's that too. But there's so much to learn from, like just shortcutting something from less text and less explanatory stuff to like just knowing from seeing a picture exactly what's going on.
Yeah, that's something I'm still learning. But I know that the one thing I have learned in all my years as a writer is, boy, there's no replacing rewriting. Rewriting is the core of.
Rewriting is everything. Rewriting is more, yeah. No, there's no just writing.
No, rewriting is it. Rewriting is the whole thing.
Yeah, you're just stripping it down and stripping it down and stripping it down.
And removing the baloney. And I find you have to put it down and walk away from it for a while in order to see where the baloney is. You can't really tell because you read it in a musical voice to yourself and you think it all belongs there, and then you forget the music when you haven't been there in a while. And
my mother was my first editor too, and she was a good writer, and she could look at my work, and as an editor she knew just what had to go, and that was she was the first person who made me realize that rewriting was writing.
Yeah.
Someone wants to know, why did your family change your name from Markowitz to Markoe?
How does that person know that? um, uh, is this a member of my family
It's
writing to the thing?
Patricia Spiglanen.
Nope, doesn't ring a bell. That was one of those Ellis Island things, I think.
Yeah.
They
So
came over, they shortened names. I have a grandmother whose name was Milner when she came over, and they told her that we didn't have Milner here in this country, and so they changed it to Miller. There's a lot of
wow.
changing of names going on.
Yeah. What do you know what year that would have been that they came over?
I don't really know. No, I don't really know the family history very well at all. I think I'm not, my parents were like second generation already, but it was the turn of the century, I think. The other century. It was the turn of the 20th
Yeah.
century.
Oh, this woman says she's a genealogist and she did a quick research and she has the naturalization records.
Oh, Jesus.
Wow.
Wow.
That's impressive. My brother's been doing genealogical research, and it turns out our family, the Ponds came over in 1630
Wow.
with the Winthrop fleet.
That's fancy.
Yeah, I mean, I wish it was, but it's not. I could be a member of the DAR, except who wants that?
You really fit in with the DAR.
They didn't distinguish themselves.
The DAR.
I think everyone should go out and buy Merrill's book because it's great.
Well, thank you. I think you should too. That would
Here,
be my
here.
final word.
Thank you both so much for a wonderful evening. We're so grateful for both of you. Continued success. Second and third volumes to come, I'm sure, and all the other work that you're doing. So thank you so much. Thanks to everyone who came tonight. We wouldn't have a virtual book tour without you. I hope to see
Well, thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Good night.
Merrill, it's really fun hanging out with you.
It was fun hanging out with you, Mimi. Nice to see you.
It was fun hanging out with both of you and all of you.
You
And
too.
thank you.